Hello, everyone. I'm Melinda French Gates, and I'm so honored to be joined today by many of you who are leaders in your own places around the world as we start to launch FP 2030. It's a new decade for family planning and this partnership. So much has changed since we first came together to start FP 2020. Today, 60 million more women and girls are choosing to use contraceptives than they were nearly a decade ago. So that's great progress. But the pandemic has really caused millions of women to also lose access to contraception and the family planning services that they're telling us they need and they want, and frankly, they deserve to have. So disruptions to newborn and maternal care have led to some of the starkest increases in global newborn and maternal deaths in decades, and that's tragic. And that's why, though, we're all here today. It's clear that our growing partnership has never been more essential. And we're fortunate that so many brilliant women in particular are leading us into the next decade of this work. So I'd like to introduce you to two of them today. Dr. Samukeliso Dube, who, as you just saw, is the new Executive Director of FP 2030, and Dr. Natasha Kaoma, who is the founder of Copper Rose Zambia, a youth-led sexual and reproductive health organization. So Dr. Dube, if I could start with you, you have a large task ahead of you as part of FP 2030. Can you talk a bit about how you see the future of FP 2030 and family planning for so many women around the world?
Fantastic, and thank you for that question. I'm so delighted to be taking on this role, certainly, because for me, family planning is not just about getting the technology in a woman's body. It's about what else can happen when a woman has got agency and has power to decide about her own reproductive health, reproductive choices. And she not only is it power, it's also having the access to the tools that are needed. So that's where we are coming from, Melinda. But in the next decade, what we actually want is to make sure we are reaching those women who we have not been reaching. So geographically, many have been marginalized. They're still marginalized. Something that we call policy evaporation. We have galvanized policies across the globe that enable women to have access, but there are women who we are still not reaching. So in the next decade is making sure we reach those women. Why? How else can we reach those women? Is to make sure that we decentralize the agenda. So the agenda is going to be decentralized into the regional hubs so that we are closer to where the need is around the family planning agenda. And that is why the reorganizing and the recalibrating of FP 2030 is going to be centered around regional hubs. So that's the important part of our programming. COVID-19 has shown us why and the importance of recalibrating. We are saying, as you mentioned earlier, that there are some pockets of programming that we have ignored. We still have some women who are dying. We ignored maternal health in some of the areas as we galvanized energies around COVID-19. So we need to make sure that our organizations are built for resilience for the next decade. And then there is another narrative. Now that we are saying access to family planning, what next? We've got a huge agenda around gender equality ahead of us. How else can we use these tools to make sure that women are involved in economic recoveries, particularly in areas that have been hard hit by COVID-19? So I'm excited to join this because it's leadership that can change and is agile enough to innovate, use technology, get to areas that we have not been reaching before, use data properly for decision making. What else are we not measuring? We want to use data better this time. And also, we want to make sure that there is the next narrative around family planning. What is it? How do we march on towards gender equality when we're coming from family planning, Melinda?
Well, first of all, as you know, I was incredibly excited when you took this role, and I think you're coming at it with a fresh set of eyes. And I really, really like that you are really thinking about the regional and local strategies, because I think those are some of the places that FP 2020 actually made the most progress. Like when we look at the Ouagadougou partnership, I think we should also stop here and say thank you to the Secretariat who worked so hard on FP 2020 and it got us to this point. When you start something new, an initiative as a group and a collaborative, that is not easy. So I want to make sure I give my personal thanks to the Secretariat of FP 2020 as Dr. Dube takes on this next role in the exciting work. So let me just go a little bit deeper, Dr. Dube. You talked about, I love that you're talking about family planning as one of the pillars that then helps with maternal health and then helps with economic development. And it's not just the tools that we help women put in their arms or the medicines that they take or the family planning pills they take. Talk a little bit more about what are some sort of unexpected strategies or places where you see opportunities.
Yeah, so I am seeing opportunities, and again, just to echo those words of say the last 10 years, great work has been done. And opportunity often comes from what you have been doing. So now, Melinda, you can imagine that there are going to be technological advancements that we need to include. How do you access these women? How do they use a cell phone in their pocket to get control and be in charge of their reproductive health? How do you use technology to get newer methods that are not just going to be one size fits all? So technology is going to be a big part of the innovations that we need to galvanize around.
Dr. Dube, thank you for that. And also, I love that you're talking about innovations and the opportunities that cell phones give us, particularly with youth. I think that's a place that there's a lot of opportunity in many countries. Let me bring Dr. Kaoma into this conversation. You've done work on sexual and reproductive rights with youth for a long time. What are you seeing as some of the opportunities in FP 2030? Particularly, we call it family planning 2030, and yet youth tell us a lot of times, well, I'm not ready to plan a family. So how do you bring youth into this conversation and meet the needs where they are?
Thank you so much for that question, Melinda, and thank you so much to the FP 2030 Secretariat for having me here. Africa is largely a youth population. It's estimated that 60% of the population is below 35, and globally there are more than 1.2 billion adolescents. Now, in this movement, we need to understand that while youth may be a fixed age, this demographic is dynamic. There are people going in and going out. Now, what that means is that their needs are changing with time. And the solutions that worked for young people then may not be effective right now. A report that was done by Chandra Mouli from WHO showed that peer educator programs, which we've been using for a long time, are no longer effective. So in order for us to remain relevant and continue programming for young people, we need to be quick to evolve, quick to change, and most importantly, we need inclusion in the development sector. For contraceptive use, we need to pull the lever from nice to have to need to do, because the only way we'll see reality on the ground is if we do something drastic. When we look at family planning as a priority, it has implications at macro level and micro level. Macro level in the sense that girls that use contraception will stay in school, they will not be interrupted, they will join the workforce. And with some of the data and statistics, it's showing that $1 invested will yield about $100 in long-term economic benefits. While at micro level, girls that are using contraception are more likely to stay in school, their children will be healthier, and this ultimately pulls families out of the cycle of poverty.
Thank you. That is really, I think, helpful and enlightening, particularly as we think about the youth being so much of the population in Africa, but also so, as you said, so dynamic. I still have a 19-year-old who's in and out of my household, and I just see how things are changing so quickly, even in terms of the tools that they use, right? Both of you, if you could talk a little bit about what COVID-19 has done in family planning and where the opportunities are and where the big challenges are, given that we're all trying to build back from COVID-19. Dr. Dube, maybe we'll start with you here.
What we are seeing, particularly in South Africa, where I sit, we are having sort of an epidemic of teenage pregnancies. And what that means is that we've got a forgotten, so somehow we forgot programming around contraception in this for youth, for teenagers in South Africa. And that in a country that has got good brilliant policies we are failing to execute well during COVID. So Melinda, I believe that COVID-19 has shown us that where we do not have hands to execute, where the marginalized keep on being marginalized, where we thought we did have access to contraception and we do not have, we need to strengthen our resolve in using technology, in using media that youth can, especially youth, can access so that they can have access to family planning. I think that, and as she said, contraception, that is very important.
Thank you for that. Dr. Kaoma, would you like to come in on this as well, please?
Thank you, Melinda. With the COVID pandemic, I'll be very honest, it was quite depressing on the reproductive health landscape because I saw girls that I know dropping out of school due to teenage pregnancies. There was also increased partner violence. And as a response to the pandemic, some countries omitted family planning from the list of essential services. During lockdowns, women have found it so much harder to access family planning services because they're not listed out as a reason to go outside or a reason to go out of your home. Now, that could have happened due to a lack of diversity among decision makers. The leadership has not been diverse enough to pick up the fact that women need contraception. And yet, when you look at it critically, family planning is one of the best anti-poverty strategies. If a woman can choose when to have babies, that impacts the whole community. Now, in order to best serve the needs of girls and young women moving forward, we need to understand that family planning doesn't operate in a silo. It is part of a larger health system, and strengthening health systems in general could improve family planning. But what we need the most to move the needle is brave and courageous leaders who will sift through ambiguous policies that govern family planning and reproductive health. We need leaders who iron out things like age of consent for family planning services, who iron out data disaggregation for decision-making, and increase domestic financing for family planning commodities. But we cannot achieve all these things without achieving gender equality, because that is what is going to govern how some of these investments are made and who is sitting at the table directing resources to things as important as contraception. So I think for as long as we don't carry gender equality along with family planning and reproductive health, the disparities may still continue.
Well said from both of you. And you are two role models in this as female leaders who see what's actually happening on the ground for women and for youth, and who can help us take policy recommendations and innovations and really make change. I so appreciate both of your leadership on this issue.
Many thanks, Melinda.
Thank you.
As we wrap up, I want to thank you both for sharing your vision for the FP 2030 partnership. I want you to know that our foundation will remain your steadfast ally, and we're proud to be recommitting our support for this growing partnership. You know, the only way to guarantee a more gender equal world is by guaranteeing that women and girls have access to the healthcare and that they need to be able to plan their futures and eventually their families. Family planning is central to realizing women's empowerment and ensuring that women can fully participate in both the economy and in society. And so we're all here because we believe that women and girls should have control over their health, their bodies, and their futures. And that's why this partnership is so important. It's work to advance women's and girls' health and well-being, but it's work that won't just impact women and girls today, but it's also going to have ripple effects in the future for whole families, communities, economies, and societies for generations to come. So I couldn't be more thankful for all the work that you've already put in as a partnership and that you will continue to do going forward. And I look forward to learning more from all of you in the future as we get this important work done. Thank you to you both for joining me today.